Hello, everybody, and welcome to our second Book of Boba Fett episode this week. We are going to be talking about our predictions and speculation for the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 2. But before we get started, please hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel for Star Wars content 3 days a week. With the Book of Boba Fett coverage, though, we will be posting 5 videos a week with our predictions and speculation coverage, as well as our Book of Boba Fett reviews every Wednesday. So you're going to want to stick to Star Wars Lads for the next 7 weeks for all of this content. We will be giving you guys a ton of stuff on top of our basic 3 video structure that we always do on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So you're going to want to stick around here for all the latest and greatest in Star Wars, because we will be talking a lot about Book of Boba Fett. So if you haven't checked out our spoiler review of the Book of Boba Fett episode 1, we posted it yesterday. It was up. We're going to be posting all these at like 7 in the morning on Wednesdays, so you're going to want to check those out. But if you haven't checked out our review, we might reference some things we talked about a little bit in that review, because we will be diving into our speculation. So if you want to hear our general thoughts on the episode and on the show so far, check that video out. So now to Chapter 2 predictions and speculation. There's not too much to say for this. I think, as I mentioned in the last video, there's plenty we haven't seen from the trailers, despite what Robert Rodriguez had teased before starting this show about it really only showing the first 10 minutes of the first episode. That is not true, because we've still not seen quite a bit of stuff. But we still seem to be having 2 storylines that are going to parallel each other, at least, I would say, through probably the midway of the show. I think it's probably going to continue through episode 7, but maybe get less and less backstory as we get further along and more of the current storyline. But I think we are going to have this structure where it keeps going back and forth between flashbacks, which is unique to Star Wars. We've never really seen this, at least this structure, ever done before in Star Wars. We've seen flashbacks. The mold was broken in, I guess you could say, The Force Awakens with like Force flashback, but really The Last Jedi was the first time we saw a true flashback in Star Wars. We have this mold broken now, and Boba Fett is going to be adopting that structure. And so, yeah, I think there's 2 fronts we can speculate on. First is how we're going to see the full circle Boba Fett come from prisoner of the Tusken Raiders in this episode to where he is in either Mandalorian Chapter 5, when he finds Finnick at the end of that episode, or Chapter 1 of Season 2, where we see him get his first face cameo, I would say, in the Mandalorian timeline. So I think we can speculate on that front. We can also speculate on what's going to go on with the main storyline, with this, all the politics of him being the new replacement for Jabba. I think, to me, that's the most interesting, obviously, because we know what happens to him after the flashback stuff, because that's like kind of how he finds his stripes again, how he becomes the Boba Fett we see now. Maybe a Boba Fett that's a bit more bent on justice and a bit more moralistic than he was prior. Maybe someone who's more willing to do something for a code or for a reason than just money before. I don't think the Boba Fett pre-Sarlacc pit really cared about ruling anybody. He's just like, pay me the most and I'm your guy, and I just want to be like the top dog in the bounty hunting world. I just want to be known as the Boba Fett. And like, now his ambitions have changed. He's a lot greater, he's a lot grander ambitions. He wants to be not the guy that's just you call for help. He wants to be the guy who calls for help. He wants to be the top dog. So I think we could speculate on those 2 fronts. Yeah, I mean, obviously we've talked in the past about what could be the big reveals of the show, right? Like, is this just a Boba Fett show? Do we have other things to talk about? Are there going to be characters that pop up? Are there going to be things that go on that really like change the way the show is done? Is there going to be a villain for this season? Like, or have we seen the villain yet? I don't know. All these things that kind of come out of your mind from watching the first episode and still kind of knowing what we knew before this episode, because not much has changed from watching this about our trajectory of the show, where it's going, how we look at it. What are your thoughts on what could be coming in Chapter 2 of Book of Boba Fett?
I mean, like you said, I think there's going to be an emphasis on, trying to progress the plot a little bit more in the present, but still a lot of the flashback story, I think, will take precedence. Um, this kind of feels like to me a little bit like the MCU TV shows where Hawkeye and WandaVision, those first 2 episodes were kind of like the story was spread over 1 episode. Well, it should have been 1 episode, but turns out into 2 episodes, and I think that's maybe what's happening here. Um, yeah, I think that we're still gonna have a little bit of a precedence with the flashbacks, and I think so far, this episode has established, at least in the flashbacks, that Boba has at least gained some respect with these Tusken Raiders who are definitely a little bit more darker, a little bit more. I don't know. They have some positive familial traits, um, but they definitely feel more like an offshoot instead of like a common Tusken Raider who would be a little bit softened around the edges, willing to work with, Freetown like we saw in season 2 of The Mandalorian. These feel like more isolationist, more traditional Tusken Raiders, but Boba seems to have, by defeating that monster that was buried under the sand, he seems to have found a little bit of respect, getting the little water pumpkin, mini pumpkin thing or whatever, which apparently that is Robert Rodriguez himself. I was looking it up. I don't know if it's exactly him, but I would assume if that's a cameo you're gonna make as a director without showing your face, that would be a pretty good spot to be in. So, um, but yeah. Anyways, I think next episode, what's gonna happen is we still need to see a lot of the footage. So I think for flashbacks, that will be the emphasis, and I think the emphasis will be on stuff with Tashi Station. I think at some he'll be a little bit more healed up. Maybe the Tuscans actually help him out a bit, without directly helping him, but at least giving him a chance to take care of his health and well-being. I mean, it's interesting because the way he was fighting the creature, now that I think about it, it seems like yeah, he's not in the best shape, but he was still able to kill that thing. And here with a bunch of guys shooting with these electric guards in present day, he felt like he took a little bit more damage than I expected in that sense, like if we're trying to compare those two. So I'm assuming, um I guess going back to Tashi Station, that stuff, we'll see a little bit more of his Tusken Raider life as he's like elevated from slave to essentially like manservant, I'm assuming. I don't think he's gained anything more of like an equal where he can wear the robes and all that. Maybe he never does. Maybe he takes those robes, but I'm assuming that he actually has a little bit of morals and codes, and that's why he feels a lot more change in the Mandalorian and a lot more in tune with his father's original beliefs. But once all that stuff is happening with the Tusken Raiders, when he is again brought to Tashi Station, or maybe he's allowed to go to Tashi Station, maybe we'll see some interesting things because there is fighting. He is. It looks like he might fight someone from the gang that he saw kind of spray paint one of those moisture farmer homes. I feel like that would be an immediate connection to see, like, hey, I can do something, and maybe it's for the Tuscans, maybe he's being forced to, but maybe that spurs him to be a little bit more like, maybe this is better than any, huge lump sum of money could give me. Maybe this is something that's connecting to those early years on Camino and Geonosis that I flashback to when I lost my innocence and before I was taken by Aura and all those people and progressively sunk deeper and deeper into this merciless version of myself. I think that would be a pretty interesting way to tie in all his changes in his conduct, I guess, throughout the stories. Obviously, they're different actors, different mediums, and all that, but I think that's a great way to start that connection of like balancing all those things out. Um, as far as present day story, I think we'll see him actually meet with the mayors actually this time, because that was a huge thing. Like the Twilight, who spoke a lot better English than I expected. I thought he'd have a little bit more of like a Tatooine accent, some broken English or something, but it was just a dude just wearing Twilight prosthetics to me. I hope that uh, that's because he's a translator of sorts for his Hammerhead mayor person. I think it'll be pretty interesting because it seems like he feels a little bit more healed up, maybe in a little bit better shape than he was going to uh, Jennifer Beals Twi'lek brothel place with Max Rebo's man. I think this time, once he's healed up with the Gamorreans and with his guns and all that, maybe he's walking in what at least putting up the front that like, hey, I'm the big shot. I am here to show you that, hey, you will be giving me the tribute, and I don't like this disrespect, and I definitely meant disrespect to you, and you're the only person here that I'm doing that to because I have planned to rule with respect, but you're the first person to kind of get on my list. So I think that'd be an interesting way to create that first antagonizing force. I don't know if the mayor is really, you know, the antagonist because in my mind, this is a show that could go bigger and even off planet versus where Kenobi to me always felt like it could be more like the novel where it's more smaller and focused. But obviously, he's gonna fight Vader and all that. So maybe this is the show that is a little bit more smaller scale. I wouldn't think so. I think we're gonna see some crazy stuff in the next episode. Um, and we're gonna get a little bit more of the balance where instead of it's flashbacks and a little bit of story, we'll get like instead of like 80-20, it'll be more 60-40, and then eventually it'll shift back down by the third episode and kind of give that full plot. But if I have to bet anything, just to summarize it, Tashi Station, um, as part of his manservant duties to these Tusken Raiders, and in present day, he's doing his direct confrontation with the mayor and brings a show of force.
I agree. I think we're going to see everything else we've seen from the trailers in this next episode. I think we kind of have to at this point. Like, we need to begin the story. What is the story? Because this episode, like you said, 80-20 flashbacks, or at least importance of the weight of the flashbacks felt like it was 80-20. We didn't directly, measure the time of how it was done, but there's really barely anything of significance in the present storyline in this. And obviously the people they fight, they're definitely going to be working for who the big villain of this is. We're led to either believe that it is the Twilight character that he meets with, who owns the gambling den or wherever where Max Rebo is playing, or the mayor. Somebody's trying to get Boba out of town. I think that's set up for us to believe that. I don't think that that's who the villain is going to be. I think there's going to be another syndicate. I mean, we can speculate. These people are wearing red. Could it be Crimson Dawn? I think that's a big thing to speculate on because Crimson Reign is also coinciding with this. The next issue is coming out kind of in the middle of Book of Boba Fett. How is this all going to tie in? Would they really bring Crimson Dawn now out of the comics because there's so much Crimson Dawn story to be told? There's that. But I think we need to develop what is the story here in the present day, because that should be the most important thing. I feel like it's interesting. I'm all for learning about Boba Fett, what happened to him in between Return of the Jedi and Mandalorian, but the way the story's structured now, that could be in a novel itself or a book, like that.
Right,
That could
right.
be
Yeah.
that's something that's the type of storytelling I guess we've been getting in novels, because it's like we know the end, we know the beginning. How did it get there? Do we need a series for that? I don't know, and that's why I never envisioned this show ever having paralleling storylines of flashback and present day, because it just seemed like we had enough. Like, I didn't ever need to see him get out of the Sarlacc pit. It was cool, and I'm glad we got it. But I don't feel like that's going to be significant unless obviously it's going to tie into who he is as a character. I think it's going to be a lot of symbolic significance more than anything. But right now, I guess after first episode, that's the part I'm more intrigued by than the present day, because they haven't really set up the present day stuff. So
Right.
there's a lot to see there.
Yeah, and
And
I mean, just to add on, it feels like this episode was just they sacrificed a bit of the present day story where this hook would have been the perfect cliffhanger because they wanted to knock out like all the iconography of Boba. Obviously, we knew this Sarlacc was happening, um, but we saw a little bit of like a Camino flash, a Geonosis moment, and we definitely saw a lot of like those initial steps towards survival, I guess, of Boba, where who is he without his armor once more? How is he dealing with these things? And those are some of our immediate questions for the Mandalorian. Like, what did he do immediately after he escaped our star? Like, what is that? How are you going to establish that? But it's a 5 year gap. So I don't think he's wandering in the desert for 5 years. We also have that shot where he's with Fennec, and he goes to retrieve the slave one. And I'm assuming he doesn't either Bib Fortuna. I don't think Bib Fortuna at that weight is really leaving his throne. So I'm assuming they do a little bit of sneaking to get the slave one too as well. So that's a whole other shot we have to see that could be put into flashbacks maybe as early as the next episode. But outside of the Tashi Station stuff, I think my gut feeling is telling me that we're gonna get a huge chunk of the present day story, even if it doesn't dominate it. We'll get that acceleration we need. It feels like if it doesn't accelerate by the next episode, with only 7 episodes total, then like you know it's gonna meander. But at the same time, we are Star Wars fans. We're both sci-fi fantasy fans, so we know that it's very common for stories to kind of just develop the world first before actually hitting the story. And maybe that is what the case is here. I still think it is a little bit of a flawed, undercooked execution more than anything. But I, I, if they make it up in the second episode, I would be more than happy. I thought the second episode of like WandaVision, for example, didn't do much for me, and it was really the third episode that got the whole thing rolling. Whereas like Hawkeye, in the second episode, that's where it started really moving for me. Like, okay, like this is what the story is going to be about. The first one was a little lackluster. The second one at least ends strong for me, and that's carried on to the third. And I'm assuming, in my mind, that the second is where we, even if it's not at the start of the episode, the second half of the episode, we start flying.
Yeah, I agree. I think not only are we going to see everything that's left, I think we are going to get at least enough hint at who the villain is that it's basically confirmed, whether it's Crimson Dawn or whether it's Cad Bane starting his own syndicate, or whether it's Bosk or somebody coming in and being like, oh, I'm the new guy in town. And because there is that power struggle that we've seen for more of the bounty hunters. It's no coincidence, as much as the comics are definitely not, they're the lowest on the totem pole, I guess, next to, if you're going to take like the main adult or older audience Marvel comics, the main adult or older audience books, and then films and TV are up here. Comics are definitely the lowest on that totem pole for sure. And I'm not saying War of the Bounty Hunters or Crimson Reign or something that happens in any of those is actually going to play a part in the Book of Boba Fett. But it's no coincidence that they've made Bounty Hunters such a big part of this year's marketing in so many facets of Star Wars media. I think stuff that we've seen, that like the power vacuum that is left at the end of War of the Bounty Hunters with no Hutts around, and then Jabba being killed, and he's like, Jabba's positioned it so no more Hutts are around, and he's like the top dog. Well, now he's gone, so the entire syndicate is gone. Crimson Reign issue 1 is about, she's just Kira's plan is to get rid of everybody and have Crimson Dawn be the only ones remaining. She also has loftier ambitions about killing Sith too, but like, there's no coincidence that this stuff is coming out at the same time, that Crimson Reign issues are being pushed back, pulled forward, all this stuff. Not saying it's going to directly tie in, but I think there's going to be something here that's a little bit more. And I think after this episode, I'm a little unsure about how I want this season to go. I think episode 2 will really solidify that for me. But I'm fine with this show being a Boba Fett character study, right? I'm fine with that. Like, I don't need Cad Bane to show up. I don't need Crimson Dawn to show up. I don't need Bosk to show up. I don't need anybody to show up. It could just be a Boba Fett, how he becomes the crime lord guy, if we get a season 2. If there's no season 2, if I kind of want more. I want more bounty hunter stuff. I want bigger bounty hunter extravaganza stuff. If this is our one shot at it, I kind of want more. So it's interesting because I am digging the Tusken Raider stuff for Boba. I want to see him evolve, but at the same time, it's like, how much time do we spend with that? Like, what story is really left there? He's earned the trust of the chief. At the end of this is like, we know you're the guy that killed it, but we're gonna pat this little kid on the back because you're not really saying anything, but you saved his life, so here's some water. So his relationship's already evolving. So is he going to do like smaller bounty hunter type stuff for them now without his armor and stuff, and kind of rediscover what it means to be Boba Fett in that sense? Does that include going to Tashi Station, where he's like doing bounties, but this time he's doing bounties not for water, but for I mean, not for money, but for water and food and, and stuff for them. Like, how does he become a part of this tribe? Like you said, 5 years in between what this should be and the beginning of the Mandalorian. So where is that going? I don't know if we really need to follow him. That could be an accelerated timeline. We don't need to see like a long stint with the Tusken Raiders for Boba Fett, in my opinion. But I think we could get past the Tusken Raider stuff. Maybe, like you said, by episode 3, we finish with the Tusken Raider stuff. We see who he is. Maybe by having Tamara Morrison, beauty is you can do any clone related stuff. Can we see a Kamina flashback? Can we see Jango Fett stuff? Can we see stuff like that? I'd love to see flashbacks of all sorts of kinds on who Boba is. If this season really is a character study, how does Boba Fett become this? Maybe with flashback to Clone Wars era timeline. If Cad Bane is the villain, could we see a younger Boba Fett interacting with Cad Bane in something we've never seen from Clone Wars? There's a whole lot of stuff that we could do here. And episode 1, just in the format that it is, has opened a whole new world for us that we weren't really expecting. Because I think from all the shots we saw, we knew that was Boba's old jumpsuit, and we knew we were definitely going to get a Sarlacc shot at some point. But I think both of us are probably surprised that this show is going to be going in like, no, this is like a Boba Fett 2.0 origin story, as well as Boba Fett saying who he is in the galaxy now and becoming this new person. To me, that opens a lot of possibilities. Even if this episode didn't necessarily like deliver on what I exactly was expecting and like the expectations that the filmmakers and everybody involved is seeming to set up for it, I think it's set up at least an interesting direction for the show, so that when we do get to those big reveals, or we do get to like what is going on here, we can, have that foundation laid, so we can now jump into the story itself and be like, this is where we're going, and this is why it's exciting that it's going there. So for me, that's gotten me more excited for chapter 2 than watching chapter 1. It's like thinking about what the show can be versus what it is so far and what we've seen so far. Because yeah, chapter 1 is nothing spectacular, but at least it lays the foundation for like, we could be doing something really cool and really special here that we aren't able to do in something like The Mandalorian. And it's also our first hint at like a true character show, and what we might be getting for something like Obi-Wan. Like, can something focus on the title character? Like the Mandalorian was titled The Mandalorian, and it focused on him in season 1, but with the addition of Grogu, and then eventually he gets his crew with Cara Dune and Grief Karga, and then season 2 is like, this is the wider universe. Does the Book of Boba Fett try to stay with Boba Fett, and does it just focus on him only? Who knows? And it could be interesting to see where that goes. I think that's it for our Book of Boba Fett Chapter 2 predictions and speculation. Let us know what you think was going to happen with Chapter 2 and kind of beyond, because we talked a lot of generic stuff about what the show's going to be. I think for Chapter 2, it's pretty obvious that it's going to stick into like a similar format to this, but start to evolve it towards where we're going. Let us know what you think this show's going to do. There's also that shot of the new character that everybody keeps talking about and speculating who is it going to be, that female character. Not in this episode. Hopefully in chapter 2. Who knows? Yeah, there's a lot to come still, and a lot we've seen to come still. So let us know down below in the comments what you think is going to happen. And then please, again, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel for Star Wars content 3 days a week, plus 2 extra Book of Boba Fett videos every week for the next 7 weeks. So you're going to want to stick with Star Wars Lads for all of that content, as this month and a half of Boba Fett crawls on into 2022. And if you haven't watched our other videos from this week, we did our top 5 Star Wars stories of 2021 on Monday. You're going to want to check that out for the best of Star Wars in 2021. If you didn't check out yesterday's Book of Boba Fett Chapter 1 review, and also our comic reviews every week, you want to check those out. And then this Friday, tomorrow, we are going to be doing our 2022 Star Wars preview for everything coming that we know about right now in 2022 for Star Wars, and what they're all going to be about. And really, it's a comprehensive guide on 2022 in Star Wars, which is looking to be the biggest year ever for Star Wars in almost every category. So you're going to want to stick around for that. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you all tomorrow for that video, and stick around on the channel for 2 Book of Boba Fett episodes every single week. Thanks for watching.